Here we are for round 2. This round, we had a total of 43 games to get through, 26 nightmares and 17 dreams. Actually, I don't think I ever explained the conceit of this disc. So for those of you who don't know, this year's demo disc is split into 2 sides, dreams and nightmares. Because while the Haunted PS1 started initially as a place for indie horror devs using a low-poly aesthetic to hang out and communicate, over time it became clear that our devs wanted to explore things other than just strictly horror. You know, sometimes they just want to do something a little off, a little weird, a little queer, you might say. And we wanted to be as explicit as possible that non-horror devs belong in this community, and so we made a 2-sided disc. If we're lucky, in the future we won't have to split it up into 2 sides, but we'll see when we get there, right? Anyway, back to the curation. So every curator touched as many games as they could possibly get through in their busy schedules, and then they had a limited pool of points to dole out to each side based on what they wanted to see the most. The idea was, with everyone's differing tastes, the best games would get better averaging scores over everything else. It was pretty tense the whole way through. While there were a couple of games that almost everyone agreed should make it through, there were plenty, especially on the more competitive Nightmare side, that were neck and neck the whole way through. So this video is going to cover the 19 games that didn't end up making it onto the disc. 3 Shots Left by Alex Hetherington is a game about a man all alone in a zombie apocalypse. They're currently held up in a doctor's office of a small town. It's unclear if they were the town doctor or what, but based on a clue you get while wandering around, whoever you're playing did live in the town and knew its residents before the outbreak. Things kick off with a car accident. You run out to check for survivors. You haven't seen anyone since day 0, whatever that means. However, when you arrive, there are 2 zombies. One shambling around and the other one pinned by the car. The game forces you to shoot the shambler. If you fail to, he'll bust into your house while you sleep, which, fair. And if you fail to get the medkit or block the road, you'll dream of death, but secure everything and you'll sleep soundly. I do enjoy the breadth of choices that the player gets to make, but the conceit of the game being that you only have 3 bullets left, I feel like there should be alternative solutions to these problems other than gun. Gun should be the easiest solution, the solution you fall back on when all else fails, and you're saving that last bullet for you. But no, in this game called 3 Shots Left, you have to spend all 3 shots in order to get the best ending. The Shambler, Pinhead, and this locked door where you get some bear traps. Aesthetically, the game is solid, and the way the screen flashes when you do spend a bullet, fantastic. It's artful. But again, my biggest sticking point is in a game where you, the player, are choosing to spend ammo, it sucks that the game forces you into it when you can easily think of better solutions. Like, Pinhead ain't going nowhere. It wouldn't be unreasonable to get a blunt object and bash their brains, or craft a makeshift spear and poke him to death. The Shambler could be taken out similarly, but maybe trying to engage them in combat while they're free is a risk, and you get hurt over it. So the proper way to deal with them requires you to grab bear traps and set one down and then trick him into shambling into it, and then bang, stick poke him. Ah, but the lock. You'd have to use a bullet on the lock, right? Or would you? I mean, again, in this desperate situation where you're conserving ammo is literally the name of the game, a brick, a big rock, hell, maybe even Granny's tombstone could knock off that lock and voila, you still have 3 shots left. Maybe force me to eat those beans for strength. I don't really know where this game plans to go either. Like, I can imagine the sections blocked off will be opened up and we'll have more options and puzzles to solve, and one day in the full game, a horde will come and you'll either need to use that one shot for us or maybe abscond to the countryside. But it's really hard to reconcile how this prologue will fit narratively with that, so imagine this portion of the game is going to be completely reworked in the release, and maybe they already intended to give the player those alternate options that aren't spend a bullet, but just didn't end up putting that in this demo. Or perhaps it plays a different character with 3 nuke bullets to spend. Ultimately though, while this game's really deep, the actual demo is as wide as a puddle, and one run through is about 5 or 7 minutes, most of which is just exploring. But if you skip all that, it's 2 minutes, which makes the demo feel abrupt. I think this needed one more day, showing the actual consequences of your choices, not just how well do you sleep at night. And I hope in a full release we have more agency in how we spend our ammo, at least up until the final decision for what you've been saving all that ammo for. Or hell, even does it have no big decision at the end. Make a player reflect perhaps on the bullets they could have spent. Like you can save somebody, but it'll cost the bullet, and the time you spend trying to like figure out the puzzle, they end up dying. I don't know, I just think there's a lot of potential here. Back to Hearth by Badoba Interactive is a very pleasant game, where you're tasked with cleaning up your farm after a disaster. The gameplay is pretty light, just find the tool required for a chore, and then click the chore. It's almost a hidden object game in that way. But the atmosphere is divine, and the simple task of looking for things to click on is kind of relaxing. Once you fix up everything, you're given a cutscene where you're introduced to two characters, and I think they're trying to set up the future conflict of finding a fiance for the young woman, while young woman would prefer to stay and be of use to her mother. I'd say the weakest aspect of this demo is that I don't really feel teased for what a bigger version of this would be. Like, I can imagine you'll clean more houses and gardens, and there'll be more cutscenes between characters, but I guess it's missing a hook, something to draw you back in. Because that was one thing the curators sort of talked about, was how complete this experience felt. Because this is one of those demos where you play it and you feel like you got a pretty complete experience out of it. And while you could imagine more, the demo didn't explicitly like tease you with what more will be. Become Dirt by Teen Fear Queers is a text-heavy game about a young girl whose family's magic is at risk of disappearing. Her grandma is attempting to pass on all of their spells, but our main character is only able to cast the titular Become Dirt, which you use during a conversation where her grandma is berating her for her failures. The spell doesn't actually turn your character into dirt, sometimes, but makes her feel as low as it, and her acceptance of her grandma's lowly view of her allows her to slip away from the conversation. Though the way it's written kind of comes off more like teenage snark that would likely just upset an authority figure. But for the sake of the game, you are allowed to leave what had otherwise been a lengthy, albeit useless conversation. Not useless in the sense that we, the audience, don't get anything out of it, but useless in the sense that the main character isn't absorbing the info as it's intended. Which is sort of what this whole game seems to be about, the horror of family trauma. The expectations thrust upon us by our elders, expectations we never asked for, and how those expectations corrode our spirits until all that's left is dirt. After that conversation, we head to our room, as we were looking for our brother before being rudely interrupted. He's not there, however. Then the game has a flashback, but it's not obvious that it's a flashback, so there's like this stretch of time where the conversation comes across like you did find him. That conversation focuses on how these expectations are ruining him as well in a different way. He is, comparably, a prodigy, and has taken to the magic much more naturally, even learning what is considered the toughest spell, Become Mechanical. He laments to you about an essay that he'd been tasked to write at school about the future, saying he just wants to learn the magic and nothing else. On the surface level, this is a fine aspiration to have, but with our understanding of the pressure their grandma puts upon them, it's reasonable to presume that this is not his true aspiration, but simply an aspiration to make someone he loves happy, and at this young age, he cannot tell the difference. Again, he's not his own person, but an avatar for his grandma to live through vicariously. These siblings are two halves of the same coin. She fails to meet expectations, and it makes her feel like dirt, where he excels to meet those expectations, but in turn, he is a machine. I imagine the full game story will be about how machines break down, and how dirt is the foundation of life. Being a game, likely it'll have multiple endings where you'll make choices that can determine if these characters break free from their chains or succumb to them. I focused a lot on the story of this game because that's kind of all this game has, is text. So much text. I'd almost call this a visual novel, but you can explore 3D environments between the scenes. Sometime during the conversation with Grandma, my eyes began to strain to read the fancy font, and there is an option to change it, but not during gameplay, and I didn't really want to go through that long conversation again, so I pushed through. I'm not usually the biggest fan of visual novels because at some point, regardless of font legibility, the walls of text become noise. It's ironic that this game makes a note of how the main character struggles with blocks of text while feeding them to you. It's pretty valid for the grandma's conversation, as it puts you in the headspace of just wanting the conversation to end, but I think a lot of the other blocks could be edited down. Anyhow, after speaking with your flashback brother, you conclude that he must be in the hideout, and the easiest way to get into the hideout is through a pantry back towards the start of the home. You enter it, and the demo ends. It feels unsatisfying to hit that wall. I guess I was expecting to find my brother, or more specifically, like, the problem, and that would be the hook. play the full game to help them fix this obvious problem. Because while I can see there's an issue to resolve, technically we are just looking for our brother after school, and there's no urgency in this task from the character's perspective. Okay, well after writing all of that, the game got an update. This time, I set the font to regular, which was much easier on my eyes, though it still wiggles. Now you can go into the crawl space where you see your brother, but it won't let you through because the ductwork is in the way. But now there's a little bit more urgency about it, as they refuse to acknowledge you. After picking up all the clues, the main character tells you about all 3 spells the family has, and we already went over Become Dirt and Become Mechanical, which are temporary spells. But the last one is Become Fear, a permanent spell which basically makes you a monster in the way that the grandma is a monster, when you buckle under all that pressure. And our main character alleges that her brother has learned Become Fear and cast it, and while it may be permanent, another can help you break it. There is a mention that her ancestors made their own magic, so I imagine our main character will have to create her own spell by the end. Probably something like Become Love to break the curse of Become Fear. The new demo ends with you becoming dirt behind a chair, and in this instance, you become actual dirt to sift through the floorboards. Unfortunately, it was kind of tough to tell how the demo would feel to somebody with fresh eyes. Knowing so much before the update, I skipped right to the crawl space, which I think jumbled the game's progression up a little bit, and not needing to read everything I already did, it was a quick 10-minute run. Still, I think the complete version of this will be really interesting if you're itching for something text-heavy and metaphorical. I really enjoyed chewing on the game's story, though the thick blocks of text are tough for me to parse because I have bad eyes. But I think that's more of a me problem. Crowded followed by Night Dial takes inspiration from It Follows, though instead of sex passing on the demon, it's this briefcase. Why is it after this briefcase? Why does your character care to keep it from them? Not really explained in this demo, but perhaps that's the plan for the full release. Basically, you're a homeless bloke with just enough change for a train ticket. You hear some gunshots and decide to go check it out. Did the demon shoot him? He tells you it's imperative to keep it away from that guy down the alley coming this way. Take the last train to the last stop and get away. So you do, spending all your change on that ticket. But oh no, you lose it, and we'll need to find another one to exit the station. And oh no, the demon got on the train somehow. So now you have to traverse the station collecting change enough for a ticket while avoiding it. Your walk speed is slower than it, and your sprint is faster. There is a dodge button too, but this is more because the station is crowded, you know, like the title, and sometimes you get stuck on people and you have to shove them out of the way. At first you think you're just looking for change on the ground, but you'll soon run out and still not have enough. But luckily you'll find out that every object can be checked, like vending machines and coin machines, the trash, seats, etc. Once you learn this, it's pretty easy to get the money you need by doing drive-bys as you outpace the demon. Strings play when you look at them, or when they get too close, so you never really have to worry about them sneaking up on you. Actually, I want to talk about the demon for a second. You remember how in the movie, the tall man walking through the door was like the scariest shot in that movie? Well, it would seem this demon is also always tall. I feel like this sort of ruins the creature's terror, because here you always know it's behind you. Unless you outrun it so much that it's sort of for it to go the other way around, but generally he's always just a couple of feet behind you and always peeking over the crowds. From a gameplay perspective, this is really helpful because you can easily gauge how far away they are. However, part of the terror of It Follows was never knowing if the person walking towards you was it or not. So it being tall kind of defeats the point of it changing form. It could just be the default skin always and nothing would be lost. Perhaps this is a first level thing. For ease, in the later levels it'll become more difficult to spot them in the crowd, but there's no way to know that based on the demo alone. That said, your stamina doesn't refill fast enough that you can take any time to actually just sit there for a moment, and it's always on your ass, which creates really good tension. But it's a very constant tension for minutes at a time, which is exhausting. Like, it's a cool little experience, but I feel like playing more levels that are more difficult doesn't sound like a very good time to me. It's a little unfortunate because the dev told us that they made a new build with more content, because that was a lot of the curator's biggest complaint, and then they never sent us over the build because they just linked us to their itch.io page, and the itch.io page never got updated. End of World by Human Hard Drive is a classic indie adventure experience. 3D world, 2D folk, you talk to people, they ask things of you. You do those things to collect items you need for other quests. It's very quaint. You wake up with amnesia, So your character is learning about the world alongside you, which appears to be the remnants of Earth, and the people who reside are split between tech and faith. Techies believe that enough upgrades will allow them to ascend to the singularity, while the faith believe that the singularity is why the Earth is shattered, and it's a cycle designed to leave people behind in suffering. The singularity fractures us, and the faith desires us to be whole, to accept the world as it is instead of trying to leave it. All the while, there's this rumor that an Ascended is out there in the desert, and the tech bros are buzzing, as the Ascended is rumored to be able to help people ascend themselves. So all the tech bros are planning an expedition to find them. It's fun to have opposed ideologies to chew on, though you don't really get a say in which side you believe is right, as you're kind of forced to obtain upgrades, because your goal is to meet the Ascended and recover your lost memory. The demo ends when you've collected enough upgrades to be allowed into the desert, and I imagine the full game will just be like the first part, but in the desert, doing side quests that feed into your main goal, and then you'll meet the Ascended. Or there'll be a twist where you were the Ascended the whole time and you rejected tech, losing your memory in the process, but the only way to know is to play the full game. Overall, it was a really pleasant experience, but there wasn't much to do other than just kind of wander around until you find the right order to talk to people. I wasn't particularly solving puzzles, I was just kind of stumbling upon answers. Enmascarado and La Venganza de Tlaloc by Entangled Games is not a demo. I suppose the curators who passed us through weren't explicitly told the demo disc is for demos, not complete experiences, and this game just managed to get through because it's pretty interesting, but it ultimately ends with a fin, instead of say a to be continued. But since we're here, let's talk about it. It's quite clear, just looking at this, that it's inspired by old movies. More than that though, it's inspired by those old luchador films like Santo and the Blue Demon versus Dracula and the Wolfman, which is very cool. I've never partaken in that genre of film myself, but I have heard how iconic the Santo films are, and I find the concept very humorous. Just these larger-than-life figures kind of just fighting silver screen monsters. Anyhow, this game is inspired by those, and so you play a luchador, the Masked, and you must beat up monsters. At first it's zombies in a city, then zombies on a train, then mummies in a canyon before finally squaring up with old Ham Hands himself, young Frankenstein, who channels the power of Tlaloc, but no one can defeat the mask. Contractually, of course. Then you drive off into the sunset. The end. This is a beat-em-up action game, and just like those games, there are so many intricate combos that you'll never think about. You just mash punch until you win. This isn't a knock on the game specifically. I feel like the entire genre doesn't vibe with me mechanically. My problems with this game are, the first section takes eons. It's just wave after wave after wave, and I start to think I'm missing something. And so I start looking around, trying to maybe like find a button or whatnot, but eventually it does end, and then you move on to the train, which is really easy to fall off of, especially since the dodge is the west button, which in most of these games is your light attack, so I kept pressing that and jumping off, which was really frustrating. Then level 3 of the mummies was excellent. I saw exactly how many mummies I had to defeat, and they even hit back often enough that I almost didn't make it out without a little strategy. However, the young Frankenstein boss was piss easy comparatively. And I have the personal nitpick of the lack of storytelling between fights. The old-timey music was a treat though. This game is at its best when it's reminding you of old movies. While this was a jam entry, I could see a bigger version of this being done with more polish and content. The idea of a Bayonetta / Devil May Cry with their larger-than-life characters, but instead of fighting angels / demons respectively, you're fighting the silver screen movie monsters like Dracula and the Wolfman, I think that'd be dope as heck. I think this was a little treat to see, and like the dev said, I don't see this very often in this space. And most of my problems are super minor or like genre issues. If you enjoy these types of games, you can go pick it up for yourself, link in the description. A small update, the dev confirmed that they did want to make a bigger version of this, so I guess we get to look forward to that. Hotdog Quest, One with Everything by Symbol Knights, is a lol random platformer. You want a hot dog, but the hot dog man is on top of a mountain, so you climb that where they're collecting mustard. He tells you to go back to his cart, where he tells you he has no ketchup, so you fly in an air balloon to a tree, roll a cow to his owner, collect a giant tomato, and then fly back, but oh no! You're captured, and they won't let you go unless you have enough money. There have been coins around the levels, and I got them all, so I only need a little bit, but I decided to collect all of the coins because I like being a completionist. But to get them all, you need 5 vines of grapes, and once you have that, you're free, so you get in a car and jump it off a ramp into a castle where there's an air balloon. And that's where the demo ends. I was a little worried at first based on the simple graphics of the title screen, but the main game has this pixelization filter that works off the simplicity really well. The flat colors keep the world from generally being too noisy. I don't think I had any glitches throughout. My only offering is that being a platformer, a shadow for where you're going to land would have been greatly appreciated, and sometimes gauging the depth of jumps was tough, but I enjoyed my 15 minutes with it. It makes sense why a curator decided to push this through, where there wasn't really a limit on how many you could. But in round 2, where we had to be a lot more stingy, it was tougher to part with a point for this. Because it's a pleasant little experience, but I feel like I've seen things like this before. However, if you think you would enjoy this based on what you've seen and heard, it's available on Steam right now for $3. Link in the description below. Mythic Dreams by BG Alex is a meditated walking sim, a la LSD Simulator. The game shows you some FMVs of cityscapes and then pops you into one, where an owl eggs you along, but you're not following no stinky owl. So first chance you get to make a choice, you get lost. But eventually you find your way down an alley that leads to some trees. You go into a cave, and now it's fall. Go into a cave, now it's winter. Go into a cave, it's spring. Another one, summer again. The final cave takes you to a beach, which takes you to a desert with a tower with a lot of stairs, and at the top there's a bell. So you ring it, and then you fall down. The end. It takes about 10 minutes to do this, though the full game promises there'll be more. The art and music are pleasant, but I'd personally like more to chew on, and I'd like a run button. But I suppose moving any faster would cut that runtime even shorter. I guess I just don't really have much to say about it, because everything the game has you've seen on screen. I think it's okay. There were other curators who loved the meditative dreamlike nature of it, so there is an audience for it. It just isn't me. Pilgrimage by Cesare is a crunchy Dark Souls. You start the game, a sound plays that peaks out your audio, and then you pick a character with no flavor text that guides you on who might be a good pick. I ended up choosing the Mystic because I remember when playing Dark Souls, the one who could cast Firebolt had an advantage over other classes. At least online guides swear it made it easier. I don't think it really did. I spawn in, and the camera is unwieldy. The mouse spins it around at Mach 10, and so I think, oh, maybe it was made with a controller in mind. So I plug that in, and it's still hypersensitive, but at least it's manageable. I spend a moment figuring out the controls, waste my Aglophidus, cast a fireball, but only one, because I ran out of mana. Okay, so my attacks are limited. That sucks, but eventually I wrangle my way over to some tutorial prompts. Like the messages in Dark Souls, I open a chest, get some items. I move on to this room that teleports you to a tutorial, explaining combat for you. It's trying to teach you to backstab, but you can't backstab with a wand, which is all I have. So I just throw fireballs at them till they die. I guess here in the tutorial you get unlimited mana. Anyway, back to the real world. I go fight a guy, cast Firebolt, and I'm out of mana. My only means of attack, and I'm empty again. This sucks! So I decided to try and run past them. Find a bonfire? You can level up, you can equip magic, but I have no XP, and I don't have any other magic, so I continue forward, and I meet a fella. Something, the trusty? So obviously they're gonna betray me, right? Oh, go pick up that key by the ledge? Sure. Dude kicks me in the hell. Why? Who knows? And cause I didn't listen to every word he had to say, the dialogue is now stuck on my screen. But whatever, new bonfire, blue bonfire. Explore a bit, find a sword, thank fuck. I go to open my inventory to swap it out, but the inventory's just for armor? Well then how do I equip new weapons? Turns out you need to use the D-pad to equip non-armored items, which I suppose works. Figured you want it all in the equipment menu, though it's not like that menu is very nice either. Oh, speaking of, while the game works with a controller and is better played with it, some of the menus are mouse only. Hope you like setting down your controller every time you need to select something. I do a little combat, but it's just not very rewarding, so I decided to just run ahead across this ledge for an item. But I guess it's much steeper than I thought, and then I die from the fall damage. So here's a fun little thing. Actually, you just fall down if you roll off the ledge. I'm wondering if it's a frame rate issue. I'm gonna wager the developer's equipment isn't very well equipped, and I just have a really high frame rate comparatively, and that's why the camera spins around at Mach 10, and also why when you try to jump over ledges using the dodge roll, you drop like a rock and die instantly. Speaking of dying instantly, sometimes you try to dismount this ladder, and it kills you. So that's cool. And every time you die, you're told you have X time remaining. I don't know if that's just how long you're allowed to play the demo, or if there's a game mechanic around it, because I never let it deplete. Basically, I tried running again as the Mystic and got a little further, but I'm not having a good time. So I reset, pick the guard, because it seems more balanced than the knight, and get to the combat tutorial where I am able to backstab. Though it doesn't really seem to hurt them all that much, and the combat still doesn't feel good, and knowing I can run past everything, I do. I just run and run and run, sometimes picking up items along the way. I miss a ladder and lose most of my health, but luckily I got a potion for that. I was going to say I juke every enemy, but most of them don't even wake up to fight. You just run past them until you reach what looks like a Dark Souls boss door. As I'm approaching, it strikes me how annoyingly far this door is from the bonfire, but as I cross over, a cutscene plays, and then the game ends? I got ending too. Then placeholder credits play for a minute before I shut down the EXE. To my understanding, this is one developer, and the effort on display is impressive. The models look great, the atmosphere is there, it's just playing it where it falls apart. I'm not a big fan of Dark Souls or Souls-like, so I think the charm of how faithful this appears to be is lost on me, and I believe that has me less willing to overlook the jank. I'd wager this made it to round 2 because the curator could see potential in it, and the devs said they'd update and fix the major issues like the camera, which should be easy enough. I don't know what engine they're using, but I'm pretty sure everything has something that allows you to decouple things from frame rate. Anyhow, we received an update on the very last day of Curation where, well, now everyone's fun colors. The loud noise is still there, the camera's still whack, the tutorial backstab is better. Now when you backstab, you actually kill the damn thing, and you can backstab a bunch of other guys too. It's great. It doesn't save combat, but it's something, right? I didn't even bother talking to that guy. The spawn is a little different, there's more walls now, and a new path. So I take that, but the ladder at the end of it's glitched out. There are more menus now, which is good because you need the poison cure to make it to the infinite ladder. While I was testing this new version, I managed to get ending 2 again, and the credits were fixed, which, you know, that's very important. Enemies still just kind of stand about. You can easily outmove them. I don't know, this game's kind of a mess. I think it still has a really long way to go before it's demo disc ready. Psycho Dive by Ink Ribbon Studios is edgy Psychonauts. I feel like I'd seen this dev somewhere else before, and snooping around, it was their YouTube channel that crossed my feed a while back. It's cool to see that they make games too. You play rugged convict action man who possesses the ability to dive into people's psyches. The game starts with a fully voiced cutscene with 2 people arguing about doing an interview with main character man, after which it just kind of starts and, well, what the heck is going on here? So I believe the dev is using pre-made animation assets, and maybe the way Unreal handles humanoid animations, it's moving its transforms around? I don't really know, but it's wonky as hell. And I believe the time that they saved using these animations isn't really worth the damage that it does to the game's perceived quality. But once you get over that, you can start walking around. Your cell is open for some reason, and after sizing up all the inmates, you move on to the hall with some guards. And at this point, I'm thinking, oh, we're doing a prison break, so I stealth around them. At least until the fire starts. And then I see this guy, he's just chilling there and he won't talk to me. And I realize, oh, something weird is going on. You go into his office, you flip a switch, go into the mess hall, and oh god, what the fuck is that? No time to think about it. Grab the key card, back to the office, which leads to the storage room. Climb up, find your first note. Reading is easy. Not reading is not. I felt like I pressed all the buttons trying to figure it out, but instead I find out that you can change the camera from fixed to third. Well, that's cool. Let's try third person. I used it for a couple of rooms before I'm like, oh, that's enough. It's literally harder to see with the third person camera than the fixed camera angles. Like, the fixed camera angles have thought put into them so you can see what you need to in each screen. Only a few times does the game disorientate you. But anyhow, up here is a key and another monster who knocks me on my ass. Get back to the office, use the key, and then you wake up in your cell where the game gives you its final cutscene. Long story short, the doctor wants to help troubled minds and needs somebody who can psycho dive, and the doctor doesn't believe that the man can psycho dive, so the main character psycho dives into the doctor and then the demo ends. I'm imagining a full game is just going to be you diving into people and solving their trauma like Psychonauts, but instead of it being a platformer, it's a survival horror. I do feel like it's missing the inventory puzzles, but trying to define genre is a losing battle. Maybe there's combat like Galarians, but I didn't figure it out in this game, so as far as my experience went, this has no combat. Looking at their itch page, there's some cool promo images that give hope for what this could be. I just don't think the demo does a good job of introducing you to the world or the mechanics it intends to have, because from my experience, this is a third-person walking simulator with wonky animations. It does have early 2000s energy that I like, but that alone won't carry me. I think the game should have just opened with the final cutscene and had the first dungeon be the Doctor's mine, which is comparatively safe and tame to the mines that we'll access later, but will uncover something buried deep that intrigues us about the Doctor, like, well, maybe their core motivation for wanting to help people stems from losing somebody to mental illness. I don't know, as is, walking around aimlessly in your mind palace until the plot happens isn't the rip-roaring good time you think it'd be. Rolus by Guinea Pig Labs is a marble racing game. It seems as simple as that. There are power-ups to collect, speed, which makes you go faster. It's the best power-up. Shield, which I think makes it so that other marbles don't transfer inertia to you, but it's not difficult to get far ahead of the pack, so this kind of becomes a nothing upgrade. And then finally Phase, which is the devil, because it turns off the walls, making you eat shit. I can imagine, perhaps, when you know these tracks like the back of your hand, Phase at the right time could allow you to skip over portions of certain tracks, but to me with no knowledge, it just felt like a punishment I didn't want to use. But if you don't use it, you can't get a new one. Though, I suppose you don't really need them, because speed is nice, but it feels like the standard speed is enough to outpace the crowd. But Phase causes you to fall, which kills all of your speed and then allows all the balls to catch up. It's almost like a blue shell, except for you can get it at any time. Overall, it's got great bones. When you have a lot of inertia and you bank those turns just right, it feels great. But the mixed bag of extremely limited power-ups and the lack of rubber banding on the AI makes the races feel lonely. And there only being one track, it feels like a bare-bones demo. Alright, there's an update and they changed the AI. Now they rubber band so hard you can't make any mistakes. It's a challenging experience, but a much less fun one. At least now you get to see the other marbles face through walls, which is kind of funny. But it looks like a glitch more than anything. It's still the worst power-up by far. And shield is still kind of useless, as the radius it has seems to be your normal ball radius, and the odds of hitting someone feel pretty small, but instead of killing the momentum, when you bump into someone, it sends them flying. This is one of those power-ups that sound really fun to use, but are awful to have used on you. Speed used to let you break away from the pack, but now they're on your ass at all times. So speed is effectively useless unless you fall behind. And while falling behind is recoverable in the early laps, if you heck up on lap 3 you might as well quit. And since round 3 seems to be the only one that matters, it makes the first 2 rounds feel like a waste of time. I think this game will be great when there are more tracks, more power-ups, AI balance settings, and maybe some marble customization. But as is, it's kinda lacking. Rotten Flesh, Call Your Dog horror game by Steel Krill Studio is a game I saw Granny play when it originally released in 2003, and the demo is just the opening section of the full game, so all of the surprises it tries to throw fall deftly. That said, it does seem to be really well put together. The tunnels feel moist, and the story of a creature who wants to be human, relatable. The game creates a powerful atmosphere of dread. I didn't know this is already fully released, and so at first I was expecting to play through the entire thing that Granny did, which I wasn't really looking forward to. I've mentioned here and there that I'm not fond of persistent stalkers. They create tension, but they have no release, no breathing room, and it's very overwhelming when you're learning the bounds of a game. So even though I knew the creature wouldn't be stalking me until a certain point, I was still filled with dread because I knew it was coming, and I really didn't want to do it. Thankfully, this demo ends before they make you actually contend with the creature. At least I think this was a purposeful death. Due to factors outside of this game's control, it didn't really land with me, but luckily I'm just one curator, so my vote didn't really sway it one way or the other. Still, I don't think it's a bad demo. It seems like an alright full game too, if you're into this sort of thing. I think if you like what you see, it's available right now for like 12 bucks on Steam. Link in the description. Seeing Things by Robot Invader is another Spot the Difference game, like Video Games 98, though from what I've been told, this is a more faithful recreation of Observation Duty, and I'm starting to think I just don't like Observation Duty type games. When I'm spotting anomalies in rapid succession, the game is fun, but sometimes nothing spawns for long bouts. Or maybe I just missed something subtle. Sometimes you get a warning when there are too many anomalies, and sometimes you get a game over suddenly out of nowhere. My theory is that sometimes it'll spawn in more than one anomaly at a time, although I'm told from the other curators who have played Observation Duty that it's just a part of the genre to game over if after your first warning. So that sucks, but who am I to judge? This game did startle me once with the woodcutter, which was pretty cool, but as is often the problem with jump scares, repeating the same trick has diminishing returns, and Chuckles just didn't hit at all. I think the reason I preferred Video Games 98 is because of the shorter rounds allowed for a sense of progression and escalation, where the level is a one-time challenge to beat, So is that 100% hard to start? There's no story to tell, just the challenge of spotting the difference. Perhaps someone who needs a new Spot the Difference game will enjoy this, but I don't really have an interest in coming back to it. Solace Creek by Starlight Studios shares the same title screen as Will of Beasts. I'm sure they're both inspired by some other game. It's a good screen, very stylish. Before we start, there is an option to turn off puzzle hints, which is good. You never know how generous those timers are, and it's annoying for a game to give you a hint before you've fully explored and can piece it together naturally. So we dive in, waking up with amnesia, as we often do, next to a bottled corpse of last night's mistake and a candy necklace. We look around, people are smearing shit on the walls to give us hints, but for now they mean nothing. We get a key, next area. There is a void to the right, some stairs ahead, and a locker to the left. Oh dear, this is going to be a hide-and-seek game with a persistent stalker, isn't it? I sure hope not. To progress, we need to fiddle with this radio that turns red, the scary color, and spawns a monster, forcing us into the closet. We don't actually see it, it's just a light that is red, the scary color. And it passes, opening the locked door at the top of the stairs for us, where we find a flashlight that reveals secrets. We piece together the code: paperclip, spiral, butt plug, bird, stick, which opens the gate by the locker. We get decontaminated and are allowed into a much bigger area. There's not really much exploration to do here though. It's this big because after we talk to this guy under the grate who's babbling about her candy necklace, and then we grab an elevator keycard, a monster spawns in and we have to use the space to avoid them. And this is where the game went from being my jam to a frustrating mess. So the flashlight triggers the monster into a chase. I turn it off, but I still get godded. Thankfully, the reset is right before the chase. I turn off my flashlight, manage to hide from the monster, but the monster patrols the elevator. Walking over to the elevator, I struggle to trigger the keycard, and the monster gets me. I try a bunch of strategies, but I just keep getting godded. There's no hiding spot like the first time you're introduced to them. It's just run, and if the camera angle changes, it's too late. Eventually though, knowing now that the elevator takes 12 years to open, I walk over, I trigger it, I run away, hide in this little reception area until I hear a big clank, then I get in the elevator where the character decides it's a good time to talk about their candy necklace, and the game doesn't pause, so I'm speeding through text at the end because the monster's closing in. Luckily, I do manage to get through all the text before it gets there, but it just triggers a cutscene when you get godded anyway, and then the demo ends. I really wish the game didn't have that frustrating spotlight at the end, because I was really into it up to that point. Had a good mystery, puzzles that weren't twisting my noodle in the knots but still got me thinking a little, moody art, the whole kit and caboodle for a banger. And if the game was just that, I'd be down for more, but now I know that at any time the game might just drop a persistent stalker and all I can do is outmaneuver it. And while it's certainly not the worst I've ever encountered, I still didn't really find it enjoyable. I get wanting to create tension, but a game over is kind of like the ultimate release, and especially when you learn the punishment for failure isn't meaningful and you just have to attempt it again, it turns the situation from a tense one into a tedious one. They did send over an update, but all it really seemed to change was the models. I think I kind of preferred the old one to the new one. The old one had Yume Nikki vibes, while the new one has Claire Redfield vibes. And from what I can gather from the very little you get story-wise, I'm gonna guess that Solace Creek is some sort of mind space that everyone shares, the collective unconscious. I don't know. The Tower On The Borderland by Daskumaru. Yeah, they submitted 2 demos. They're working hard over there. Is a game about a girl climbing a tower that borders the realm of dreams and reality? Unclear. You were just kind of plopped into the map by a bonfire, wander about for a while until you come across some monsters, try to fight them, realize fighting is tough, and then spend the rest of the game running around them because they don't reward you in any way. You go up some elevators, down some elevators, wander about, you're not really sure what you're doing, and then suddenly the title drops. It feels out of nowhere. Usually a game will have you complete a tutorial area, and then as you enter the world, the title drops. During round 1, players were reporting that the demo took nearly 2 hours to complete, and the DD crew wanted the games included to be an hour or less, so there's a possibility that there was a more natural lead into that title before things got shuffled around for time. Anyway, now we're in the thick of it. Still not sure what we're doing, but we push ahead looking for content when out of nowhere, you get a phone call from someone surprised that you're alive. Eventually another cutscene plays, one where the game reveals its antagonists, Deerhead, Wolfhead, I think Boarhead? I feel like there were a few more, but I don't recall. It's a lot of people at once, and they get so little time to make an impression. They're discussing their mission at this tower and you. It's very expository, proper nouns type shit that probably makes more sense when you understand the story, but for now, all I really picked up was that they have a mission to kill things so their boss can feed, and the main character girl was part of the team because of nepotism. Anyway, that was happening somewhere else in the tower, so we'll worry about that when we get there. For the here and now, we meet a guy who says he wants bugs for dinner, but I don't have any right now, so I move on. I'm sure it's become apparent at this point that I've discovered that this game suffers from the Ocarina of Time problem, where dodge rolling feels faster than walking, so I'm tapping that B button and it's awful. After 45 minutes, my thumb hurts, even with swapping off my fingers at some points when I didn't need to move the camera around. Speaking of the camera, it's kind of annoying how the game wrestles control away from you at doors. It disorientates me every time. Like, you get off an elevator and you check the map, say, I need to go left, and then you go left, and you're like, wait, no, fuck, that was right. It's not game-breaking, but the radius you have to walk away from is just so far, and I don't feel like the cinema is worth the tedium. Now, where were we? Oh, right! I find a bug, and I struggle to understand how to collect it. Turns out you have to lock on, and then you can squash it. Then, I meet a giant head who says I need to take care of the usurper, and then I can pass. Thinking back on it, I wonder if I could have gone back after the boss fight. Oh, don't worry! We're gonna talk about the fucking boss! But first, the game has this map, and you're going to be super reliant on it, because finding stuff naturally? For losers. So at first I wasn't using the map, I just pushed through to the natural end of the line, but felt so underpowered against the boss, I thought maybe I missed something important, so I walked all the way back to the beginning, checking all of the question marks on the map, just to find out that most of them are bugs, and surprise encounters. But the combat, before you understand it, is so atrocious that I die, and the next time I stumble on a counter, I just run away. I end up getting 5 bugs, which is how many you need to get Bug Boy to talk to you. So he talks to me, where he regales a playable section where you walk in an open field, enter a tower, and find a shrine. So, was this bug hunt just for lore? No upgrade for a second health shot or like a bigger stick to fight with? Just lore. I mean, if you're interested in it, cool, but I don't feel like the trouble of getting all those bugs was worth being told about the one time some guy found the tower. I presume that guy was Father Whoever, but I have real problems right now. Like this boss fight that's kicking my butt. So you spawn the boss, and he's one of the animal head dudes from earlier, the Wolf Man. He has 2 wolves with him, a real carpet demon fight. At first I try rushing in, and that just gets me killed in seconds. Okay, well maybe I'll lure the dogs away from him, and then I can take care of them, and then I can focus on him. But I spent the entire game avoiding combat, so now I'm learning in real time how to fight. There's no way combat can be this bad. I have to be missing something, right? I get a couple hits on the dogs, and then they freeze up. The boss comes up, and I run to reassess the situation. And as he passes the dogs, they turn and bite at him, taking a chunk off his health. And I'm like, oh, this is a puzzle boss. He's supposed to be too powerful to take on, so indirect methods are required. This begins the tedious cycle of luring the dogs away, dodging their attacks, hitting them. At some point I realized the knife swing lunges you forward a decent bit, but I don't have mastery over the quarter loop of combat yet. But I am feeling like I can do this. Lure, dodge, backswing, do that twice, the dogs lock up, man walks by dog, and the dog bites. Or at least they try to. At some point, the dogs will start missing their bites like 75% of the time, though sometimes if you're really lucky, one dog will do 2 bites of damage in a single jump. I whittle him down, losing health here and there, but in the end I'm able to finish him myself. Heck yeah! Oh, wait, what? Ah, fuck! They have a second form? Of course they do! God damn it! Okay, well, now I have to fight this 3-headed beast thing, and he's quicker than the dogs are, so his swings get me. Well, at least tell me I can jump into the second part of the fight. Ah, for fuck's sake! Okay, dog kiting, man stabbing. I almost don't lose any health because the combat has become trivial. 2 dodge back, 1 stab, rinse, repeat. I get to phase 2, and then I realize that the dodging has iframes that cause a hiccup in the frame rate to tell you that you should have been hit, but you were invincible. But you just continue the song and dance of 2 dodge back, 1 stab forward until he dies. Then he tells you that you beat the demo, and I take his word for it. I quit the game, and I'm left feeling really disappointed. I was hyped for this one. The 2 curators who pushed it around too said it was fantastic. I'd even seen some notable figures excited for its launch over on Twitter, and so I came in with high expectations. And then the game couldn't really live up to that, which sucks for both of us. I think my core issue was the combat. Basically, when I didn't understand how it worked, it felt impossible, and so I just avoided it. And since the world has enemies sprinkled through as a majority of the content, avoiding them made traversal feel lifeless, which wasn't very fun. But when I did understand how the combat worked, it became trivial to the point that there was no longer any difficulty, which also wasn't fun. Either way it sliced, there wasn't an obvious reward for engaging with combat outside of the boss fight for progression, so why bother? And without the combat to hold this game together, that just leaves exploration, and the map trivializes that aspect, because it autofills all of the points of interest, which is great when all I want to do is complete the open world checklist of chores the game has, like collecting bugs. But also, I feel without the map, players would become lost in this maze of concrete, and that would be its own frustration. What the game does have, the thing that I think it really executes on well, is style. Much in the way I like Godby Saga for the art and scope, but found the gameplay half to be boring at best and tedious at worst, this is just kind of like another flavor of that. And like Godby Saga, the minimalist style of storytelling leaves me wondering, who am I? Why am I here? What is motivating me to do what I'm doing? I feel like I'm willing to put up with a lot when I'm properly motivated. I really hope all of this is just me not being the target audience, like not getting it. I'd like the game to do well. I could tell that a lot of effort has gone into it. But gosh, does this game leave me feeling empty? Wizard of Gloss by Dracula's Cave, or, well, by according to the lore, is a platformer from 1994, but the original team went crazy and died, and then the source code was lost to the countryside of France. But luckily Dracula's Cave found it, so here we are playing it. The controls are a little unwieldy. Tab to shoot isn't my first choice for that function, but it is what it is. You play 2 levels of this platformer, solving its little puzzles, the second of which has some funky tunes. And then once you complete both, it's revealed that you've been playing a game within a game. Entering a first-person area that looks like an office space, you wander till you find blood, hear a scream, and then the game's over. I didn't even know what I saw when I triggered the scream. I had to look back at the footage later. I feel like this is going for an analog horror vibe, and I can respect that. A simple, non-threatening piece of media that's actually really threatening has room for potential, but I don't think the demo did a good job of hooking me. You needed way more time outside of the Wizard of Gloss game to set up the analog part of this horror. I was a little surprised this bare bones experience made it to round 2, but I think this game mostly got lucky with its curators. Where every other team cut at least 2 to 4 games on their list, the team that got this one only cut the demo that wasn't a demo, Scout's Honor. And this only got through with a light, if we have extra space, which I agree is a reason to push. In round 1, the curators can't know what state all of the other games are in outside of their tiny pool, and there's nothing wrong with this game. It plays just fine, and I think it's got an interesting enough premise. I wanted to see more of what it planned to do with that premise in the demo. The Zebra Man by Thunder Zebra appears to be Hotline Miami inspired, but I only have a cultural osmosis knowledge of that game. I've never played it, but a top-down, hyper-violent, sudden death where you wear an animal mask while someone feeds you tasks to do? You tell me. I think the best parts of this game is when it's not being a game. The opening cinematic with some dude in a zebra mask and the guy in the shower getting wrecked, and then the credits with the explosions and the graphics, that shit slapped. But then you get into the game, and the first thing you do is take a dookie, and then you shower, and then a tape gets slipped into your room. Tells you to bust a move, so you start slaughtering everybody. There's 2 enemy types, melee and pistol. Melee is piss easy as long as you never stop punching. But pistol, you need to make a beeline for, or have your rage mode activated, because they'll kill you quick. It's not that hard of a game, it just kind of requires you to have prior knowledge of a level. I don't think I beat a single level my first try, because I'd be surprised by a pistol at some point. I don't even remember how many levels you go through. Was it 4? You get a chainsaw at the end, and it feels worse than the fists because the fists are instant, where the chainsaw has to rev up. I think you're meant to rev once and then let it run, so the rev shouldn't be an issue, but the chainsaw uses fuel, and foolish me, being conservative with my ammo, just wouldn't let it run. After having played it, I think I'm just not a fan of this style of game. I found it kind of tedious, having to slowly check all my corners and play the same level over and over again, just because I didn't know a pistol man was going to be in one of the rooms. Honestly, I almost gave up on the last level, but I suppose I'm glad I didn't, because then I wouldn't have gotten to see the credits, which are a lot of fun. Zero Below the Sun by Black Curtain Studios Reminds me heavily of Deep Fear, an old survival horror game on the Saturn, though it clearly grabs inspiration from other sources as well, like Metal Gear Solid's inventory system or Dead Space limb cutting. The idea that the infection is an alien rather than mutant bacteria, a la The Thing. The game starts with you needing to figure out what's even going on, and then once you meet someone who knows, you're tasked with stopping it. The demo ends more or less when you complete the first step of 4, and there is a story hook that the scientist man you're helping tells you he figured out something important. The demo probably could have ended right there with that cutscene instead of making me walk all the way back down the stairs. When you're not following instructions, you'll be fighting monsters in this over-the-shoulder perspective, mostly with a pistol, though you'll get an SMG that you really don't need because the pistol's OP. Like Dead Space. You can take out their limbs if you want, but I don't think you need to. I suppose it's more like Remake 2 in that way, where you can shoot out their legs, but body shots are just as good. The pistol has a laser pointer that doesn't work until you get an upgrade, but it's kind of worthless because like 2 seconds later you'll pick up an AMP upgrade, and you can only have one at a time, and the AMP makes your shots more powerful, while kind of keeping the dot, so... The lack of reticle kinda hurts the game, because even with it, I feel it's very easy to miss your target. There was a rat on floor 4 that I couldn't kill because my bullets kept missing it. Or like, how I shoot at the neck, but since there's no hitbox there, it would just be a wasted bullet. Enlarging the hitboxes or making shots more consistent in some way would be a boon to this game. It wasn't so bad I couldn't do it, but I'd worry about players who don't really know where the center of their screen is. A more minor hiccup is that it suffers from the Ocarina of Time problem, where rolling is the fastest way to traverse the facility by a country mile. There is a run button, but it's comically slow, and a stamina drain is way higher than rolling the same distance. I think the run speed and stamina drain could be tweaked so this isn't the case, and then that could leave the dodge for actually, dodging. The only negative to rolling though is that sometimes you'll roll right into an enemy spawn, but it's a small price to pay for getting around faster. Overall, it's rough around the edges, but I think if you look past those small abrasions, there's a really cool experience here. Zero Losses by the Marivo Collective says it's about the horror of the last few days in an occupier's army. You spawn in and you're told to round up the troops. Everyone has something to say. Nothing left to scavenge. How dare they say we aren't peaceful? I'll kill them for saying that. Real army boy shit. Once everyone is in the truck, you start driving. Welcome to 90% of the game. Just driving down roads, it'll get dark, it'll start to rain. You get headlights and windshield wipers, but I didn't use the wipers. The game lets you move the camera around to get the best view, even lets you select an outside cam for a cinematic view, but I was always terrible at driving in GTA with a cinematic camera, so first person it is. Anyhow, eventually, you come across a roadblock and are forced to go onto a trail. You follow it for a long while until you run out of gas, then you fill her up and your passenger princess is gone. But they left you a radio, so you take it and you exit the vehicle to play Marco Polo. Or, I guess more triangulate the direction it wants you to go in and then just run straight into the darkest woods. I literally couldn't see anything. I'm just following the radio waiting for something to jump scare me. Eventually, the radio resets. It does this a few times so you get proper disorientated. Once you're thoroughly lost in the woods, your radio cuts out. A man screams, and then you drop dead a few moments later. I think Zero Losses' fatal flaw is how long nothing really happens. Like, I hear often that the army is boring, and I suppose it captures that aspect perfectly because you just drive and drive. The most riveting gameplay is avoiding potholes. It doesn't even feel like there are interesting things to see outside most of the time. You pass a checkpoint that leads to a bridge, then a village, then some blast craters, and then finally the roadblock. Maybe if your passenger princess was telling you more interesting stuff along the way, or like, if the sounds of gunfire were getting more frequent and clearer as you drove, let there be some dread that you're heading to the front lines. I don't know, maybe you see a medical tent with like wounded along the route? But I suppose you can't feel dread for the life of a character you don't care about. And the main character is no one. They're an avatar for the player. But your squad? They could have been. If we got just a little bit more than boys ready to fight, maybe they could have been characters we'd be sad to lose. Honestly, it was a little disappointing when the game became more of a bog standard horror game, wandering around the woods with low visibility, because I see a lot of potential in a game that emulates and reflects the actual horror of being a soldier, to fight and die for a country that doesn't care about you. I truly worry that a full version of this game would just be a psychological horror where you wander around as things happen to you, because that's the kind of impression the game left off on me. Alright, that's everyone who made it to round 2 but didn't quite make it onto the disc. Competition was super stiff. Having a limited number of points made it really tough because there were a lot of games on here that the curators really liked, but we had to be conservative with our points. In round 1, there wasn't really a limit on what could pass, so some games made it through just because the curator thought that somebody else might enjoy it. There were a couple of games that I pushed through after getting denied by their initial curators because of that, and they did really well in the second round. Though, some didn't. Still, not making on the disc isn't the end-all be-all, and by no means is a mark of quality. Personally, there's a good handful here that I'm stoked to see more from in the future. Plus, there's always a chance for some of these with longer development cycles to try again on the next disc. There was a game that didn't make it through Spectral Mall's curation that is going to show up on... So I'll tell you more about that one next time. Until then, like, comment, subscribe. If you've been vibing with what I've been doing here and you want to give me some financial freedom to do it more, I have a Ko-fi. Although if you want more tangible goods to pay for, I also have a game coming soon that you can wish this here. And as always, keep dreaming.